This idea is so deeply embedded in our culture that most people don't even think to question it anymore. As the number in your bank account grows, you're told you're successful, that you're safe, and once the figure is big enough, you're supposed to believe you've won the game. But history tells a very different story. It's filled with people who had more money than entire nations, yet ended up powerless, ruined, or forgotten. And it's also filled with others who never held vast fortunes, but built something far more durable. Value. Real value. The kind that doesn't disappear when markets shake or currencies collapse. Once you understand the difference between wealth and value, one thing becomes clear. Most people are chasing the wrong prize, and when you run toward the wrong finish line, the race almost always ends in loss. So let's strip this illusion away, starting in one of the most spectacular settings in history. France under Louis XIV of France. By the early 1700s, Versailles had become the heart of European luxury. Gold leaf, marble halls, elaborate gardens. The palace itself was a showroom of wealth. Nobles spent fortunes to maintain appearances, importing silks from China, sugar from the colonies, wine from Bordeaux. From the outside, France looked unimaginably rich. But that wealth was fragile. The economy rested on war plunder, colonial extraction, and debt. Taxes crushed the peasants while the nobility paid almost nothing. As the palace glittered, the foundations of the system quietly began to rot. That contradiction couldn't stay hidden for long. By the early 1700s, France's finances hit a wall. That's when a Scottish financier stepped in. John Law. He took control of the treasury and believed paper money and the Mississippi Company could fix everything. At first it looked like magic. Money flooded the system. Trade accelerated. Paper fortunes exploded. Nobles and merchants believed they were getting rich faster than ever before. Everyone thought the game had been won. But there was no real value underneath. Mississippi Company profits were inflated. Louisiana land was oversold. There was no productive base to support it all. And when confidence collapsed in 1720, the wealth vanished almost overnight. Those who chased fast money were destroyed. Those who owned land and productive assets survived. This became one of the earliest and clearest lessons in modern Europe about the difference between apparent wealth and real value. And it wasn't unique to France. In the 1920s, American investors treated the stock market like a one-way road upward. Cars, radios, skyscrapers. Everything signaled unstoppable progress. Leverage increased. Risk piled up. Paper wealth multiplied. Then came 1929. And most of that wealth evaporated instantly. The survivors weren't the ones with inflated portfolios. They were the ones who owned things that still worked. Farms that produced food, factories that made essentials, businesses that solved real problems. The lesson France ignored was ignored again in America. Money is not value. It's a claim on value, and when the value disappears, the money becomes meaningless. The crash of 1929 wasn't a one-time disaster. It simply revealed an old truth again. Wealth without value dissolves fast. And once again, the lesson faded. One of the harshest examples came in Weimar, Germany. After World War I, the country was drowning in debt, political chaos, and social exhaustion. The government chose to print money. At first it seemed reasonable, temporary, necessary. But it spiraled out of control. Workers were paid at noon and rushed to spend their wages before evening. Prices doubled within hours. Lifelong savings shrank to the price of a bus ticket. Money stopped functioning as a measure of value. Banknotes were hauled in wheelbarrows. Not because people were rich, but because the paper was nearly worthless. Who survived was obvious. Those who held wealth only in marks were wiped out. Those who owned land, gold, foreign currency, or essential goods preserved something. The lesson was brutal, but clear. If the value underneath is rotting, the number of zeros means nothing. The same scenes appeared later in the 2000s in Zimbabwe and in the 2010s in Venezuela. Money existed. Value didn't. And without value, money is just ink on paper. So here's the real question. If wealth is this fragile, why do people still believe it equals security? The answer lies in the system itself. Stocks are priced on expectations. Real estate depends on interest rates and credit. Currency survives on trust. And when that trust cracks, wealth collapses quickly. A more polished version of this played out in the 1980s in Japan. On paper, Japan sat at the top of the world. The land beneath Tokyo's imperial palace was said to be worth more than all the real estate in California. Japanese corporations bought landmarks across the globe. Stocks soared, fortunes ballooned, but most of it rested on belief, not value. When the bubble burst in 1991, trillions vanished, companies failed, markets collapsed, real estate stagnated for years. Yet Japan didn't disappear, because something real remained: an educated workforce, strong manufacturing, a culture built on quality. That was value. It didn't erase the pain, but it made recovery possible. Here's where the distinction becomes clear. Wealth is a label the system assigns. Value is what remains standing when the system shakes. The ability to produce, to endure, to be useful. Value can be a skill, a network, a productive asset. Knowledge that solves real problems. When markets panic and currencies fail, value holds, because needs don't disappear. This principle goes back to ancient Rome. The richest citizens of the Roman Empire owned massive estates. But real power came from controlling grain, oil, and wine, the essentials the city depended on. Over centuries, the denarius was quietly debased. The coin looked the same. The emperor's face didn't change, but its purchasing power vanished. Those who held only money lost everything. Those who controlled production kept their influence. The rule never changed. Not in hyperinflations, not in market crashes. So the question becomes personal. If history is this clear, why do most people never achieve real financial freedom? Because they chase wealth instead of building value. They accumulate without asking what supports it. If your entire life depends on an index, a salary, or a currency you don't control, you may not be as safe as you think. And now this stops being history. This becomes about today. Modern security is measured by the wrong signals. High income, large homes, big portfolios. They feel reassuring. But history shows how quickly they fail. The 2008 crisis exposed this brutally. Millions discovered their wealth was just debt in disguise. Home values collapsed. Loans failed. Foreclosures followed. Security vanished overnight. This wasn't individual failure. It was systemic. The system trains people to focus on appearances because appearances can be measured and sold. Value can't. And that makes it inconvenient. Governments and corporations prefer people who think in numbers, not resilience. The more wealth and value are confused, the easier it is to trap people in debt and consumption. History is clear. During the Great Depression, survivors weren't the ones with piles of cash. They were the ones with skills, land, and productive assets. In crises, real utility beats abstract promises. That's why farmers, craftsmen, and adaptable businesses often emerge stronger after collapses. Real value sustains itself as long as it can produce. But there's a trap. We're taught to look wealthy. High salary means success. Big house means safety. Large portfolio means freedom. Until the system shifts, then debt tightens, income erodes, assets freeze. So many people appear rich but are fragile. History is full of elites who lived lavishly until the tide turned. They were wealthy until they weren't. Because wealth without value is a sandcastle, impressive but fragile. The conclusion isn't theoretical, it's practical. Real financial freedom means your life doesn't depend on the stability of systems you don't control. That requires diversifying value itself. Productive assets, durable skills, reliable relationships, things that work in any environment. Across history, the pattern never changes. Productive land, essential goods, skills that resist automation, enterprises that meet real human needs, gold, oil, intellectual property. The form changes, the rule doesn't. Financial freedom is this, the ability to endure and grow regardless of how the rules change. If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Wealth is not what you've been told it is. The system thrives when you chase numbers, because numbers can be manipulated. Value can't. Value survives collapse. Seeing the difference exposes one of the oldest traps in economic history. History may not repeat exactly, but if you don't understand it, the outcome never changes. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History is full of answers, and I'll keep showing you where to find them.